useful to some of you. First of all, I want to bring up a few points. One is that the word Ridvan is an Arabic word meaning paradise and is considered the greatest festival for Baha'is. And usually we say the most great festival of Ridvan, and that is celebrated 1 month after Nowruz. Also, I need to say why the name Ridvan was given to this festival. And this is because there was a garden by the Tigris River in Baghdad that was named Ridvan. And the gardener's name also was Ridvan. That is one of the reasons. We can talk about Ridvan from 2 points of view. One, from a philosophical and a spiritual aspect, and the other one from a historical point of view. Let me first explain the historical aspect of Ridvan, and then I will get to the most important part of it, that is the philosophical or spiritual aspect of Ridvan. Historically, I'd like to start from the year 1852, when the persecutions of the Babi community in Iran intensified. There were a lot of hostilities at that time, and one of them was the imprisonment of Baha'u'llah in Iran's most dreadful prison. But eventually, through the family mediation, because he was from a family of ministers, the government agreed to release Baha'u'llah from prison on the condition that he leaves Iran and go into exile in any other country. So during these 4 months of imprisonment, because of the bad conditions of the prison, Baha'u'llah became very sick. And that is why he went to his cousin's home, Maryam, to rest and get ready and get better before his departure from Iran. In parentheses, I should maybe mention, it is interesting to note that Maryam and Baha'u'llah were cousins, and they were born on the same day, the same month, and the same year. And they had exact same age, and they grew up together as they were, as I said, cousins. At that time, different countries invited Baha'u'llah to their countries. But Baha'u'llah chose to go to Iraq, which was part of the Ottoman Empire at that time, and was also closer to Iran than any other place. So the departure from Iran was in 1853, and he was exiled to Iraq for 10 years, meaning until 1863. To summarize what happened next, I should say that Nasreddin Shah, the king of Iran at the time, was a very religious man and wanted to visit the Islamic holy places. And for that, he had to pass through Baghdad at that time to get there to the most holy places. Again, at that time, many of the Babis of the time that later became Baha'is, known as Baha'is, lived in Baghdad. And this worried Nasreddin Shah very much, that he might be attacked by them. It was not true, of course, but at least he was not comfortable going through that area at the time. So to remedy that, Nasreddin Shah and his minister, several ministers, tries to move Baha'u'llah and his companions away from the route of Nasreddin Shah's pilgrimage. I mean, to move him from Baghdad so the Shah could go on the pilgrimage, and also to limit Baha'u'llah's contact with his friends in Iran. That was the reason they were trying to move Baha'u'llah away from Iran and away from Baghdad. They put a lot of pressure on the Ottoman government through diplomatic channels. Nasruddin Shah used the Iranian ambassador at the time, Mirza Hossein Khan Mushirotdoleh, and also his foreign minister, Mirza Said Khan, trying to convince the Ottoman officials to send Baha'u'llah to a different city, further away from Iran. Finally, they succeeded, and Baha'u'llah and his companions were moved to Istanbul. Istanbul at the time was the Ottoman capital, but the decision already had been made to send Baha'u'llah to even a further city, that was Edirne, which was further from Iran. But this message was not conveyed to him at that time. When Baha'u'llah's departure from Baghdad became known, and the friends heard of this departure, they came to say goodbye to him. And the number of the visits had become so many that it was complicating the packing and getting ready to move. At this time, when one of the Baha'u'llah's friends, Najib Pasha, heard of this challenge of preparing for the journey to Istanbul, offered his garden to Baha'u'llah and his family to stay there meanwhile the family were getting ready to move out. And so the friends who wanted to say goodbye to come to visit Baha'u'llah and his companions in that garden. This garden again was managed by Ridvan as a gardener or as the custodian. Baha'u'llah, along with a few others that he chose, went to this garden. And the rest of the family joined them on the 9th day of Ridvan. And of course, on the 12th day, they all left the garden towards Istanbul. It's worth to say that there were two gardens of Ridvan. One being the one I just mentioned in Baghdad, and the second one was in Akka, that was built later on in memory of the garden of Ridvan in Baghdad. Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha built that second one, and sometimes Baha'u'llah used to go there in remembrance of the days of Baghdad. The persons that accompanied Baha'u'llah on the first day of Ridvan, they were Abdul Baha, also Mirza Mehdi, his second son, Mirza Musa, his brother, and Mirza Ghajan, his secretary. And later, about 70 other companions went to Istanbul with Baha'u'llah. We don't know really exactly what happened in those 12 days. But what we know for sure is that the most important things that happened were two things, two principles. One was a letter that Abdul Baha wrote at his father's request, explaining the recent events that led to their departure from Baghdad. This letter is very interesting, but we don't have time now in this Zoom to review that. But the second and the most important event, not only in those 12 days in the Garden of Ridvan, but for the Baha'i community and for the whole Baha'i faith, is what Baha'is call it the declaration of the cause of Baha'u'llah, that I will explain a little bit. But before I forget, it's worth noting, in parentheses, that on the first day of Ridvan, before Baha'u'llah's move from his home to the Garden of Ridvan, he wrote a very important tablet called the Tablet of Patience. That the reason for writing this tablet on the first day of Ridvan is significant, because the first day of Ridvan is the day of the beginning of the fundamental transformation in the life and writings of Baha'u'llah. And in this tablet, Baha'u'llah predicts a future filled with difficulties and hardships, and emphasizes that what is required is patience and perseverance in this path. In later years, another tablet was written, and the name of the tablet is the Tablet of the Son of Perfection. And it was about the first day of Ridvan, but again, we don't have time today to review that. Here, the very important point that I need to emphasize is that the spiritual and philosophical aspect of Ridvan, and that he's based on three announcements or three principles that were declared on the first day of the entry into the Garden of Ridvan. Now, what are these three announcements or these three principles that I'd like to explain? Friends, number one was that Baha'u'llah appeared as a new prophet with a new message, as it was foretold by the Bab. The Bab said, the promised of the Bayan, his name is him whom God shall make manifest, will come soon. So this was the first one. The first announcement or a message was initially for those who were waiting for such a person based on Bab's glad tidings. In other words, the first announcement is the declaration of the start of a new era, a new culture, and a new thought and idea, and abandoning traditions and what is considered old. In other words, moving away from previous beliefs and embracing modernity and constructing a new worldview based on social justice and a law for all humans, regardless of creed, sect, religion, or beliefs, even for those who are atheists. But what is the second announcement of Ridvan? That was the name and attributes of God are manifested in everything. That is very important. That means abandoning the Islamic culture that said everything in the world is either pure or impure. This view is completely set aside at Ridvan. Baha'u'llah said that everything is immersed in the ocean of purity. It means to draw the attention to the fact that religions are means to make us a better human being. And the first step on this path is changing our view, where the time of impurity or purity has passed, and the time for moral and intellectual growth has arrived. The time has come to see everything and everyone as pure and clean, because if we look at it correctly, everything is a sign or an attribute of God. This is a new thinking and a new culture that we all need, that in order to create a better and a kinder world. Baha'i writings explain that the first step on this road is moral and ethical education. The first day of Ridvan is the day of the beginning of this change and this transformation, the day of moral renaissance. But the third announcement of Ridvan, what is it? That is, the third announcement that Baha'u'llah did was that all religions, writings, and religious sayings do not have a permanent validity and have all due dates. They are all means for human progress and the promotion of humanity, and none of the religions are permanent, and the Baha'i faith is not exempt from this rule either. Humanity has been changing, and religions need to change as well accordingly to meet the needs of the people. The third announcement is that it takes another 1,000 years for the next prophet. This principle says that divine knowledge is not limited to one and only one religion or only one book. Also, this declaration in the Garden of Ridvan emphasizes the abolition of the law of jihad and replacing it with the principle of peace and friendship and the spread of a universal culture of love and cooperation. Dear friends, in this Zoom I should mention that really the final analysis, Ridvan means the beginning of a culture of love and affection. The first day of Ridvan marks the start of a new civilization, a civilization that ethics becomes the foundation, a culture that abandons categorizing people in different ways and looks at the human as one body. In other words, Ridvan is the day of a new and great thought. That is why it's called the most great festival, because on this day, the greatest event in the world happened. That is the foundation of a new spiritual and universal civilization based on new moral and spiritual values have been established.